Topping today's news, CARICOM and U.S. officials meet to discuss possible visa sanctions over the Cuban medical program. A man found dead this morning on the island of Eleuthera. Amendments made to the Defense Force Act and the Parliamentary and Registrar Commissioner removed following challenges with the local government elections. Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. Thank you so much for joining us. The Bahamas Ambassador Wendell Jones and other CARICOM country representatives were set to meet in Washington, D.C. today with U.S. government officials as the Bahamas and the region seeks more clarity regarding the State Secretary Marco Rubio's announcement about the revocation of visas of officials from countries who engage in the Cuban labor program. Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell said as much.
The U.S. Secretary of State will hold an off-the-record briefing with diplomats in Washington today, and our ambassador will be there. The U.S. Charge in Nassau made a statement herself to the press explaining their position. The Bahamas government has responded officially to the various assertions made by démarche by the U.S. We responded formally and simply put the position that is our public position. The Bahamas does not violate any international labor hiring norms. That's it, folks, plain and simple.
When news of the proposed U.S. sanctions emerged and the government defended its relationship with Cuba's medical program, the official opposition publicly agreed with the government's position. Mr. Mitchell, who is also the PLP chairman and who regularly butt heads with the FNM chairman, Dr. Dwayne Sands, who made the statement on behalf of the opposition, said he was pleasantly surprised.
I was in such a state of shock the other day when he actually stood with the Bahamas government on its health policy insofar as hiring Cuban medical professionals concerned. If I remember correctly, he may actually have uttered the words, "We agree," or "We support the government on the hiring of Cuban professionals because the healthcare system depends on it." Blow me down. If that continues to be his position, then great, because we've been saying all along, divisions should end at the border, and we should face the outside world with a common voice and face.
Foreign Minister Fred Mitchell. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, U.S. Charge d'Affaires Kimberly Furnish sought to ease fears by Bahamians during an interview with members of the press on board the Coast Guard cutter Lawrence Lawson that was docked at the Nassau cruise port. She said the foreign policy was not directed solely towards the Bahamas, but rather a precaution taken for every country possibly involved.
And I just really want to highlight that that was really a global inquiry from the United States. So that inquiry and that question about the Cuban medical program went through every embassy, U.S. embassy in the world, to their local hosts. So I really want to state that the Bahamas is not targeted by this. This went to every embassy in the world. The Cuban medical program is something that we're concerned about. There have been some human rights issues within that program. We're not aware of any that are happening in the Bahamas. It's simply the beginning of the opening of a discussion about that program. And I've had this discussion with top leadership here, with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. We've talked about it at length. We're not targeting any individual Minister of State here. There's no concerns there. It's just simply a discussion. We're talking about how these Cuban medicals are treated, how medical professions are treated, how they're paid. We want to make sure that their human rights are being met, right? And this is really more about the Cuban government and not the Bahamian government. So I just want to highlight that for the group. And we're having wonderful discussions about it, and appreciate the question.
Prime Minister Davis has since responded to the announcement and advised that the incident does not warrant a loudmouth response and that the Bahamas would take a comprehensive approach to the U.S. concerns, balanced with the crucial life-saving work the Cuban medical teams have and continue to do in the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. Police have begun an investigation into the discovery of a man found dead in the area of Bahamas Power and Light, Governor's Harbor, Eleuthera. Police notified the press of the incident around 11:30 a.m. this morning. There were no further details, though, on the identity or how the man may have died and if there were any injuries to the body. We will, though, have more details as they become available, provided by the police investigators. The Minister of National Security, Wayne Munro, moved the second reading of the Defense Amendment Bill 2025 that seeks to adjust the re-engagement and continuation of service for Royal Bahamas Defense Force Marines that have served 40 years and are eligible to retire but have not yet reached the retirement age. Mr. Munro explained that the reason for the amendments to the existing law that was passed by the Minister administration in December of 2020 is to reduce the number of Defense Force Marines retiring prematurely.
And so, Madam Speaker, while we move to increase the size of the force to its optimal level, we have to address matters that relate to attrition from the force. In addition, Madam Speaker, to these men and women who will retire, I am coming across the desk of the Minister, Madam Speaker, a number of requests for Marines of various years of service to retire from the service. I'm confronted with any number of Marines who are submitted to me for warrant punishment for dismissal from the force. Many who, because of injury, leave the service. And so, Madam Speaker, this, as I say, is a very incremental step to address attrition, and that is simply, when I next look at this list, Madam Speaker, after this bill is passed, the retirement age of every Marine, if they wish to, should say 60. Not some saying 60, some saying 58, some saying 59.
Mr. Munro also wanted to make it clear that the officers asked to continue their service despite being eligible for retirement are not old men that are unable to perform.
And Madam Speaker, lest the public be concerned that this is a military, and are we just hanging around with old men? As Madam Speaker, I enter that category of old men. I find that an offensive way to address persons. But Madam Speaker, in order to continue in the service, Marines and officers must pass a fitness test with fitness requirements. And so the public can rest assured that the only military that we have in this country, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, is manned with men and women who are not only committed to the service, but fit for the service.
Although expressing concern about the failure to adequately support law enforcement agencies in the country and a call for the Minister of National Security, Mr. Munro, to resign, Leader Michael Pintard said the opposition supports the amendments to the bill. And finally, in this segment, after complaints and criticisms, including from the official opposition about the way local government elections, which were held in January, the government has swiftly moved Arthur Taylor as acting Parliamentary Registration Commissioner. This as pressure and anxiety builds as it leads up to the 2026 general elections. Following the local government elections, Mr. Taylor defended the process but committed to correcting many mistakes that may have occurred in preparation for those local government elections. Reports are that Mr. Taylor has been transferred to a different government agency. It is unclear, though, which agency, and it is also unclear at this time who will replace Mr. Taylor as the Parliamentary Registration Commissioner. You're listening to JCN News. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back following these commercials.